Today we're in Anaheim, California at Disneyland, and we're gonna be going inside the park and talking about how things here at Disneyland have changed since the 80s and 90s. So let's go see what we can find. Our day begins right outside of Disneyland on Harbor Boulevard. On the other side of those trees, you can see what used to be Tower of Terror. It's now the Guardians of the Galaxy ride in Disney's California Adventure. But back in the 80s and 90s, in this area, you would have found the Atomic Age Lodge, which can be seen in the movie Gleaming the Cube. This is where Vin Kelly was murdered. And then just to the right of that would have been one of the main entrances to the Disneyland parking lot. It had that large old school Disneyland sign. That also can be seen in Gleaming the Cube. Now these days, before you even get onto Disneyland property, you've got to go through a security checkpoint. Whether you're coming from the downtown Disney side, which is where we are right now, or you're coming off of a tram or whatever, you've got to go through a security checkpoint where you go through a metal detector, they go through your backpack. But I will say, I think out of all the theme parks, Disneyland is probably the friendliest security and the least problematic. Magic Mountain, definitely the worst. Universal is probably next, but Disneyland, pretty easy. All right, we made it to Disneyland. You can see the entrance right there. And the entrance is one of the things that's changed since back in the day, because if you look directly across from the main entrance, you'll find Disney's California Adventure theme park. And back in the 80s and 90s, all of this was a parking lot. There was no California Adventure. You used to be able to pull your car right up to the main gates of Disneyland. Imagine that. Now you have to park 15 miles away and take a tram or walk forever. But back in the day, you could park right in front of Disneyland. And there used to be a pickup and drop-off area right here too. I remember a couple of different times coming here with my friends in the early 90s and coming out of the exit and standing right here and then seeing my dad pull up right over here in this area. It was so convenient, we didn't even have to walk anywhere. We could see him right from where we were standing. Those were the days. So I was gonna start off by showing you that one of the biggest things that's changed here at Disneyland since the 80s and 90s is the prices. But they've actually taken down all the prices outside of the ticket booths, and it says to download the app. And I think the reason why is because the prices now change daily. All right, just to give you an idea, I'll show you on the website real quick. A standard park ticket starts at $96 per day, but then you gotta choose how many days you wanna go. If you do just one day, that brings it up to $104 per ticket. And we'll do one person over the age of 10. Then you got to decide between a one park per day ticket or a park hopper ticket. A park hopper ticket will get you into both Disneyland and California Adventure on the same day, but that tacks on an extra 65 bucks. So we'll do just one park per day. Click continue. Then you got to scroll down to the calendar and choose what day you want to go. As you can see, it ranges anywhere from 134 to 154 to 169 to 184 for Saturday and Sunday. So anywhere from 134 to 184, and that's just one park for one day. I mean, it's really crazy how much the prices have gone up. When I used to come here a lot in the 90s, a season pass was about $75 and a one-day ticket was around 22 bucks. So I was lucky enough to go to Disneyland one time with my parents when I was a kid. I was about 4 years old and I don't really remember anything. A couple of vague memories, but for the most part, nothing. But whenever I would bring up to my parents that I'd like to go to Disneyland with them, my mom would always snap at me, "We already took you to Disneyland, don't you remember?" Well, no, not really. But what's weird about that trip is my parents had a camera with them, actually 2 cameras. And the way that I know that is there are just 3 photos that exist from that trip. 2 of them were taken with a Polaroid instant camera and 1 of them was taken with a regular camera. And so my parents had 2 cameras with them, but for whatever reason, there's no pictures of me in front of the castle, no pictures of me with Mickey Mouse, sitting in Dumbo, or standing in front of anything iconic at Disneyland. The 3 pictures that I have, you can't even really tell that we're at Disneyland. So I don't understand why my parents had 2 cameras but didn't take a bunch of pictures. Anyways, the reason why I bring this up is today, while we're in there checking out other stuff, I'm gonna try and match up those pictures. I've been to Disneyland 100 times, but I've never thought to do this, so I'm kind of excited about it. So, all right, let's head inside. Okay, we're inside the park now, and not too much has changed here in the front. Not too much has changed on Main Street either, but there are a few things. So who remembers when Disneyland had a bank? At one time it was a Bank of America, and then it was just Bank on Main Street. It's now just a gift shop. It was this building right here. And then right next door, you can still find Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln. And inside the building for Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, you can find the actual bench from the Griffith Park merry-go-round that Walt Disney used to sit on and where he first dreamt of Disneyland. Also, one of the horses from the carousel. And like I said, not a lot has changed on Main Street. Some of the stores have changed, but you can still find a lot of the same stuff, including the Main Street Cinema, still showing Steamboat Willie. So the first photo of me that I wanted to try and match up, it appears that I'm walking somewhere on Main Street, but it's really hard to tell because the camera is pointing down and you can't see any buildings or any landmarks. But I'm almost positive that that photo was taken right here in this area. Now the brick on the sidewalk has changed. In my photo, it's just solid red concrete, but the ground has been repaved since the early 80s. Now this is the only area that has a curve like this where the sidewalk is flush with the street. So I'm about 99% sure that right here is where I was crossing the street. Now, although there's no photo of me wearing it inside Disneyland, there's pictures of me wearing a sweatshirt that my parents bought me from Disneyland. Unbelievably, it was saved all these years and I was able to pass it down to my son and he wore it when he was a toddler. And now I have it back in storage. I was really happy to see that they brought this sweatshirt back and I was able to buy one for my wife during this trip. Now I think probably out of all the lands here at Disneyland, Tomorrowland, I think, is probably the one that's had the most changes since the 80s and 90s. And starting with the rocket ride right here in front. Now this has it's been moved at least 3 different times. It used to be in the back of Tomorrowland. If you were looking this way, it would have been just to the left of Space Mountain. It then was placed on top of what at one point was the Rocket Rods launch pad, and then it's now here at the front of Tomorrowland. Now the very next thing that you'll find is Star Tours, which has been here since 1986. Some people consider this to be a new ride because it's now Star Tours, The Adventures Continue, but it's basically the same ride. Although the original Star Tours featured Pee Wee Herman as the voice of the pilot.
I meant to do that. A little shortcut.
So I guess I do prefer the original. Before this was Star Tours, it was Adventures into Inner Space, which was here until '85. And then directly across from Star Tours, you'll find Buzz Lightyear's Astro Blasters. Before it was Buzz Lightyear, it was the queue line for the Rocket Rods, but originally this was the Circle Vision Theater. Now you'll notice in this area there's a track that goes right above me, and it goes pretty much all through Tomorrowland. This is the original People Mover track, which was here until '95, and then in '98 this became the Rocket Rods, and the Rocket Rods was only here until 2000. However, it was hardly ever open. I want to say I only got to ride the Rocket Rods maybe a few times because it was always broke down, but it was a really cool ride. It was basically just a faster version of the People Mover, but the People Mover was really great too. And the track is still here, the launch station, the queue line, all of that is still here. So I really wish that Disneyland would just refurbish this and bring back either the People Mover or the Rocket Rods. Either one would be great. In the back of Tomorrowland, nestled right in between Space Mountain, currently Hyperspace Mountain, and the Star Trader store, used to be the Starcade. You'll see the sign is still there. However, the actual Starcade has been gone for quite some time. Now, if you don't know what the Starcade was, it was an arcade, which you probably could have guessed by the name, and it was a two-story arcade. You can see right up there, there's a second story. And so this building right here, which I think is currently nothing, this used to be the Starcade. Right up there, that was the second story. Bums me out that the Starcade is gone. Cool that the sign still remains. Directly across from Starcade is a theater, which I don't think has been used for a while, but this used to be the theater where they showed Captain EO. And then after Captain EO, this was the theater where you would go to see Honey, I Shrunk the Audience.
Everybody okay in there?
I'm down here.
Oh, there you are, Nick. Sorry, everybody. The machine blew a fuse.
Which was another great one. I don't know why they don't bring back those shows as a throwback instead of just having an empty theater. Now, right across the way from that, you'll find Alien Pizza Planet, but originally, this was the Mission to the Moon, and then later Mission to Mars. I had no idea that this used to be a ride. I'm familiar with the Mission to Mars ride. I just didn't know that it used to be in this spot. And it was also in this area, just beside where Mission to Mars used to be, where the rockets originally were. And then, like I mentioned, they were moved up there, and then eventually to the front of Tomorrowland. And then just beside where the rockets originally stood, you'll find this building, which I remember as Innoventions. And I just recently found out that Innoventions shut down in 2015, and it's now, well, it's basically nothing. It's a photo spot to take a picture with Darth Vader, but considering the size of the building, it's weird that they're just using this for a photo spot. Another thing that used to exist in this area was the Disney Skyway, which was a cable car that went from Tomorrowland to Fantasyland, and it went right through the Matterhorn. They've since closed up the hole in the Matterhorn. Luckily, I have some video of my wife riding it when she was about 5 or 6 years old, and there's video of her going right through the middle of the Matterhorn. Now, one of the things that I miss in Tomorrowland is the stage that would rise up out of the ground, and they would have different cover bands that would always play here. And this area would be full of people dancing and having a good time. The stage is still here, but as far as I know, they just don't use it anymore. Now, one of the only other photos of me inside of Disneyland Park appears to have been taken right here in front of the Star Trader store. My Uncle John is holding on to me, and my mom and dad are sitting beside us, looking very disgusted at something across the way. Right across from the Matterhorn and just beside the submarine ride, you'll find another little patch of water that used to be the loading station for the motorboat cruise ride. Now, this ride was here for a really long time. However, it was always breaking down and having problems, and it was changed a lot. It eventually became the motorboat cruise to Gummy Glen, themed after the gummy bears. If you go on the other side towards Autopia, you'll see a dry lake bed, and you can still see the spot where the motorboats used to pass underneath the Autopia track. Speaking of Autopia, we decided to take one last ride on it while we were here, because the rumor is they're going to be getting rid of the original gas-powered cars and replacing them with electric vehicles. I wonder if they'll finally go faster and not stall anymore. Probably not. All right, back to the motorboats. But this spot right here is the location of the final picture that I have of me inside of Disneyland. I'm sitting on one of the motorboats with my Uncle John and Aunt Lucy. If you walk straight to the back of the park, directly across from Small World, you'll find the Fantasyland Theater. But back in the 1980s, this was Videopolis. Videopolis was a dance club aimed at teenagers, and I think out of all the things I missed out on at Disneyland in the 80s, this is the one I'm most sad about.
Oh, good evening, my friends, and welcome to another exciting Saturday night here at Videopolis at Disneyland.
I'm your host, Swedish Chico from K-Rock Radio.
I have a friend who grew up in Anaheim, and his sister's a few years older than us, and she spent pretty much every weekend at Videopolis. Seems like it would have been a blast. Just across from Big Thunder Mountain, you'll find the path to Galaxy's Edge, or Star Wars land, but this used to be Big Thunder Ranch. Now, this is where you would go to see the horses when they weren't out in the park. This is where you would go to get Big Thunder barbecue. Later, they had a petting zoo here, but now this is all Star Wars, including Rise of the Resistance, which is one of my favorite rides. Kind of surprising because I'm not a huge Star Wars fan, but really, this ride is great. I love it.
Find an alternate route. Who picked these two droids anyway? Cruiser has not seen a level D. They cover recruits. If anyone's packing a blaster, now's a good time. The escape pods should pull us. Wait, why are you going up? I said down, up is bad. Up is real bad.
In the back of Frontierland, you'll find the Winnie the Pooh ride. Of course, this used to be the Country Bear Jamboree, and then the Country Bear Hoedown. And at the exit of the Winnie the Pooh ride, you'll find the Pooh Corner store, which used to be Teddy Bear's Swingin' Arcade. And then right across from Winnie the Pooh, you would have found Splash Mountain, which opened in 1989. Now, they're not technically getting rid of Splash Mountain, they're just re-theming it. Where Indiana Jones now is, this used to be part of the Eeyore parking lot. And actually, when you're in the queue line for the ride, when you're in the room with the projection, if you turn around and look at the projector, you can see one of the signs for the Eeyore parking lot. It's really hard to see, and actually, I'm not even sure if it's still there, but here's a picture of it. And has anybody ever noticed that the area in front of Indiana Jones is one of the most crowded areas in the entire park? Inside Fantasyland, just after you enter through the castle, you'll find this store that from 1955 to 1983 was the original magic shop called Merlins. And if you look above the door, they still have a sign paying tribute to the original magic shop. And funny enough, as soon as we walked out, we saw a parade, and the first thing we saw was Merlin. All right, that is going to conclude my day at Disneyland. I am exhausted. I'm sure there's a few small things that I might have missed that have changed since the 80s and 90s, but I think that I covered at least most of the major attractions. So I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.